The U.S. and Iran seeking a path to peace. Meanwhile, Israel and Hezbollah on another front, trading attacks by the day. New video you're watching now shows the IDF dismantling that proxy's missile launchers, and Israel saying it's destroyed more than 1,200 rocket launchers. These ongoing attacks weighing on the peace talks between the U.S. and Iran.
The Strait of Hormuz, another flashpoint. President Trump warning Iran against charging tolls for safe passage. General Jack Keane calling Iran's moves par for the course.
The United States military can secure defined space that's moving through the straits and make certain that anything that tries to penetrate it is going to be defeated. I'm not optimistic about it because this is what the Iranians do. I mean, they are masters at obfuscation and delaying negotiations.
Matt Finn is in Dubai near the Key Waterway with the latest from the region. Hi, Matt.
Good morning, Dana. The UAE says Iran launched more than 2,500 drone and missile attacks at this country and that Iran should pay for the damage. And also, Iran cannot remain in control of the Strait of Hormuz. But it appears right now that even though about a dozen vessels have crossed the strait since Tuesday's ceasefire, there is not a free open flow on the strait, which Secretary of State Rubio says is a violation of international maritime law. A senior Israeli official tells Fox News this morning that Iran is demanding fees to pass through this strait. The Israeli official is saying the strait is effectively under IRGC control. They decide who gets to go through, but more importantly, who does not. And the UAE government agrees, saying conditional passage is not passage. A UAE official writing, so let's be clear, the Strait of Hormuz is not open. Access is being restricted, conditioned, and controlled. Iran has made clear through both its statements and actions that passage is subject to permission, conditions, and political leverage. That is not freedom of navigation. That is coercion. Now, President Trump has been very stern on the strait and wrote on Truth yesterday that Iran is not cooperating, writing, Iran is doing a very poor job, dishonorable, some would say, of allowing oil to go through the Strait of Hormuz. This is not the agreement we have, President Donald J. Trump. Now, I spoke in person with an advisor to the UAE president here, Dr. Anwar Gargash, and asked him to kind of help us conceptualize what is going on out at that strait. And he says it's a mixture of different criminal elements. Some countries are directly paying Iran, while other smugglers and pirates are out on the water, either demanding payment or even stealing goods. Dana, Bill.
Hey, lots going on. Thank you.
So Dan Hoffman, former CIA chief of station, with us now. And Dan, this is right up your alley. Your analysis is very critical here. First, J.D. Vance 2 hours ago before he departed U.S. soil.
As the President of the United States said, if the Iranians are willing to negotiate in good faith, we're certainly willing to extend the open hand. If they're going to try to play us, then they're going to find that the negotiating team is not that receptive. So we're going to try to have a positive negotiation. The President has gave us some pretty clear guidelines, and we're going to see.
Okay, so what we know from the American side, open the strait and don't go nuclear. What about the Iranians? What are their objectives, Dan?
Yeah, I think, look, in the short term, what Iran wants to do is demonstrate that they have leverage to make us feel economic pain so that they're going into those negotiations in a stronger position. Strategically and over the longer term, what Iran wants to do is reduce or eliminate altogether, in a best-case scenario for them, the U.S. ability to project power in the region. There's no better way to demonstrate that than by controlling the Strait of Hormuz. They're going to take as much as we allow them, and that's why Vice President Vance's remarks there about being ready to go back and launch kinetic strikes if needed were so important.
So at what... trying to figure out like what would be the straw that breaks the camel's back on that, because one of the things that we just heard from Matt Finn is that the UAE is saying like this cannot stand. The Strait of Hormuz has to be open. There has to be freedom of navigation. But the Iranians right now, they do hold those cards.
Yeah, I think this is going potentially at least to require the United States to work with our Gulf ally and NATO partners. The British have excellent minesweeping capabilities. We need to demonstrate we have a plan to open the strait on our own if needed, but we may have to go back and launch more kinetic strikes against the Iranians. The question is whether those negotiations will even begin tomorrow, because the negotiations are contingent upon the strait opening and on a ceasefire in Lebanon, neither of which is happening right now.
In the meantime, the head of NATO, Mark Rutte, has been in Washington for several days. Really came here, Dan, and did not seem to be in much of a hurry, which signals to me, anyway, that There's some work to be done. Here he is now on the possibility about NATO countries getting together and helping out with the Strait of Hormuz and opening it back up.
Each country is now looking for what they can do to contribute to this, to make sure that the Strait of Hormuz stays open. Of course, it is early days. There's only, as you said, rightly said, 2 days into the ceasefire, so we have to see what happens with the shipping lanes. The president is very keen on making sure that the sea lanes are open as soon as possible.
So that was from yesterday. Me and the White House fired back and said, as President Trump said yesterday, NATO is tested and they failed. He has zero expectations for NATO, even though it's a fact that they benefit from the Strait of Hormuz far more than the United States. How much of this is hyperbole? And how much of this is real that we need to pay attention to?
Yeah, I think, Europe is still smarting over the fact that the Trump administration didn't advise them in advance before launching kinetic strikes on Iran last month. And the Trump administration is upset, particularly with Spain and France, for denying us access to air bases in Spain and then airspace that we would have needed to conduct strikes on Iran. It's not all of NATO. It's certain members of NATO that were a bit recalcitrant and saying that this is not their war. I think the best thing that we can do is iron out our differences in private so that we don't allow our enemies to gain any advantage over us, and then look at a smart way forward. Whatever decisions we make should be made for what's best with U.S. national security. If we're going to move troops around that are stationed in Europe, let's do what's right for U.S. national security and not as a means of exacting retribution on our European allies who might not have liked the way this war went down. But once the war started, it was over to Europe to do the right thing. And now they've got a chance to help us in the Strait of Hormuz, and I hope we can work this one together. That would be good for the alliance.
All right, Dan Hoffman, thank you so much.
Need it. Thank you, Dan.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.